Hey, good morning. Today is Friday, March the 15th, 2024. It is now 7:18 in the morning. I want to begin my World War III series. There is an unexplored reality as relating to the possibility of the origin of World War III. There is an unexplored possibility as relating to the origin of World War III. What that means, I'm going to explain, and I'm going to explain the possible consequences as well as the warmongering that seems to be happening in international relations. Now, for many years now, I have watched or I have come across many videos on social media, most especially on YouTube, talking about the possibility of World War III, where World War III is going to start, how it is going to start, and why it is going to start. But there is something that is very uh, eerily similar in all of the videos. All these videos have somewhat a Eurocentric messaging to it. When I mean Eurocentric, I'm talking about in regards to the perspectives of Europe and America. Basically, as PLO Lumumba will say, the conceptual West. All of the video also seem to position the rest of the world, the rest of humanity outside of the conceptual West as either dictatorial haters who are beginning wars only because they hate the West, most especially because they hate the United States and the United Kingdom or the West. They hated the freedom of the West. All of these videos seem to position Africa as either subservient to the powerful countries, as not having a perspective in terms of Africa or African willingness, okay? Africans' willingness to engage in the war, to participate in the war, okay? Africa seems to take a role that is gullible only to produce or provide raw materials for the war effort for either the West or the Western enemies, and that Africa will not experience any growth. It is as if African leaders or countries or intellectuals have no brain. They're just going to get themselves involved in something that has nothing to do with Africa. It is the same thing for South America. South America in these videos, okay, seem to only play the role of a producer of wealth, of raw materials for the rich and powerful countries, many of whom, many of which are in the conceptual West. The same thing as the case for the Caribbean. But why is it that World War III, why would World War III be considered a world war? Then, if that's the case, okay, in terms of this question, we need to look at World War I and World War III. World War I was known as the Great War. But then, when we had World War II, hence the reference to the Great War as World War I began. But why are these wars even considered or even termed or called world wars? It's open for debate. Actually, I don't believe these wars should be called or termed or referred to as world wars. I have coined a phrase for this, and I'm certain that it is going to be controversial. Rather than calling these two world wars, and possibly the next one, world wars, we need to call them white wars. This means White War One, White War Two, and possibly White War Three. And the reason for this is that both world wars has nothing to do with the majority of humanity. These are wars that basically came about because of something that happened in Europe, something that Europeans were doing. And again, these wars, okay, especially what happened in the Second World War, were basically wars that came about because what Europeans had been doing around the world to people of color, to natives around the world, came back home on European soil. These wars basically were the results of alliance system, imperialism, economic system, Europeans' thirst for land, for occupation, and to be dominant in their spheres. The rest of humanity got involved in these wars because one, these other places around the world were controlled by Europeans. Many of the people were subservient. They were weak and basically considered property or the territories of Europe. Africa, yes, Africans participated in both world wars. Did Africans had anything to do with the origin of the war, the initiation of the war, the initial stage of the war? No, it has something to do with Europe. But because of the relations or the relationship of Africa to Europe at the time, Africans get involved in the war. It was the same thing for India. It was the same thing for the Afro-Caribbean state. It was the same thing for Latin America, okay, for both world wars. Asia, you have a war that started in one region and everybody get involved because of it, because of their relationship with the powerful countries, okay? And I had coined a phrase before, which I will talk about in future videos, pertaining to why World War One and Two are considered world war, and the audacity of Westerners to term these wars world wars. But what I just said is basically a deviation from what I was going to talk about, or what I'm basing my talk about. So, for the past few years, I've watched many videos on social media about guys who are making these simulations, okay, based on their prediction of what World War Three is going to be like, how it's going to fight, how the war is going to emerge. But there's something about these videos that are scary. Is that when you listen to the content creators talking, the narrative, it is as if they basically are cheerleading the war. It is as if they want it to happen. They have some elaborate, sophisticated looking simulation of the wars. And even these simulation, it is often the United States and Europe together. Russia is often the enemy. China is often the enemy. So Russia, China, Pakistan are sometime, or most time, in Iran are grouped together as the axis, as the enemy, and Europe and the United States, the West. Africa basically is color coded as gullible. Africans have no brain, they have no mind of their own to say, look, we don't want to do your war, we don't want nothing to do with your war. Or Africa doesn't seem to have a system where Africans will say, enough is enough. We're not gonna engage, but if you mess with us, we're gonna put our feet right up your ear hole. It is never the case in these videos. The same for South America, the Caribbeans, the rest of Latin America, Middle East, and Asia. But In terms of the possibility of World War III coming about, it is often portrayed in these videos as World War III being originated from Asia, one being the Middle East, war between Iran and Israel, or that the Third World War is being initiated or coming about as a result of China invading Taiwan, or World War III is coming about as a result of North Korea invading South Korea or whatever tension, or bombing South Korea or bombing Japan. But also in these videos, you often see that the end of it, the consequence, the end result is that the West come out victorious. The Axis, the enemies, the devil, who basically get into the war because of hatred of the US and the West, they always get defeated. Their militaries are always unsophisticated. This was the case for the war in Ukraine. Now, the war in Ukraine, I think it exposed something that I do believe people in the global South took notice of, and many governments in the global South will begin to act upon. One thing is when the war started, I remember learning about it. I think it was on the 24th of February 2022. That were horns being blown, being sound, or whatever. The news went off about Russia invading Ukraine, blah, blah, blah. And then I remember watching emergency sessions in the UN. You can tell because in international relations, countries will not just go there and start speaking because and start saying whatever, especially the weaker countries, because anything you say, it's gonna be placed on record, and what you say as a representative of your government, your country, could mean somebody dies somewhere. It could mean embarrassment for your country or for another country, and it could basically mess with the relationship of your country and another country. So you can see that even though many countries were against the invasion, they did not verbalize it, but you can tell many seem to support Ukraine to an extent because the experience of the rest of the world, the rest of humanity, the global South, is that of a subserviency where a bigger country comes and just bombing a poor countries. This is our experience from Africa to the Middle East to Latin America to the Americas. Africa, we were bombarded. We would have been wiped out, but we were too many and close together in terms of proximity. The Native Americans were basically done away with. Okay? What is it? It is said that about 95% of Native American populations were wiped out. So, countries basically, because of the experience of countries and people around the world, it appears that there was support for Ukraine and a condemnation for Russia, even though to an extent you couldn't hear it being verbalized. But something came out when videos of Africans and Middle Easterns and Indians being shown on TV, being prevented from boarding their trains and leaving Ukraine. African students had to walk miles just to go to safety, many trying to get to Poland where they were refused entry. In addition, Western politicians and journalists coming on TV using words such as the world and the West need to get together and protect and defend Ukraine because the Ukrainians are white people with blonde hair and blue eyes. I remember hearing and seeing that being played out on television. Watching India's Republic TV, and news all over the world. There were tweets and people talking like, hold on a second. So what about the people in Iraq who died? What about the people in Libya? What about the people who Western countries had been banging on for how many centuries and decades? So they were supposed to die because they are people who do not have blonde hair and blue eyes. Other things came about where they were saying that the Ukrainians are not refugees. They are Europeans, Christians, sophisticated people. So refugees are poor, unsophisticated black and brown people. In that, what it said was refugee poverty and everything else is a black and brown thing. So even hardship is being placed to represent a minority. So these are things that basically kind of exposed Europeans or the conceptual West. Another thing was that in the West, many were saying that the Russians are unsophisticated, the Russians are going to lose. But now it is very strange. Whether they lose or not, the fact that the entire West is basically fighting Russia and Russia is still standing, it's very scary that we are seeing countries that had advertised themselves as being sophisticated, countries that had advertised themselves as being powerful, ganging together, grouped together to fight the most quote unquote unsophisticated country, which they basically portrayed Russia, and still are not winning. It says something about these countries. Now, one thing that stood out to me from the warmongering of the past 2 years, there were statements being made that Vladimir Putin was being accused that Russia was going to lose the war. Now, whether they lose or not, it's their business. But I'm talking about some of the warmongerings that happened and the implication in terms of the origin of Third World War. They say Russia was going to lose, and that if Putin is about to lose, if it is that Putin will lose the war, okay, Russia will lose the war. Vladimir Putin will use a nuclear bomb, will resolve into a nuclear war. Okay, but then the same conceptual West is saying that it is determined to defeat Russia. That is a scary thing. You are saying that it's a madman with the most dangerous weapon who is at war with the most sophisticated, rich, freedom-loving people. If this madman is about to lose a war, he's going to end the world. But then you are saying that you are dedicated to defeating this madman. Now, a defeat is, to an extent, I think in international relations, a country losing a war to a country being defeated is about the same thing, and it's not the same thing. Anybody can lose something, but when you are defeated, you are breaking down completely. So you are saying that Vladimir Putin will kill all of us if he is going to lose the war, but then you want to defeat him, which means he's going to kill all of us. And this is one of the things that basically shocked me in terms of the blood-thirsty narrative, the things that were happening for the past 2 years in terms of the possibility of a third world war and what is being propagated, what is being carried out in terms of our actions in international relations. There is an unexplored possibility in terms of the potential origin of the Third World War. Now, the Third World War, I do believe the origin of such war will be similar to that of the Second World War and the First World War before it. Whether you're talking about alliance system, whether you're talking about economics, big power politics, small power politics, etc. However, in terms of why and should such war be considered, be termed, or called World War is open for debate. But I do think it should not be considered a World War. Perhaps not yet, but I do believe the first World Wars before it, before the Third World War, World War One and World War Two, were not World War. I don't want to be controversial. However, given the players of the wars, given that uh, the majority of humanity, the vast majority of humanity, has had nothing to do with World War One and Two, rather than them engaging in such wars because of their subservient relationship at the time with European society, European countries. Okay, we should consider World War One and World War Two White War One or White War Two, or European Great War One, European Great War Two, not World War One and World War Two, because Africa had nothing to do with World War One and Two. South and Central America and the Caribbean, Latin American countries had nothing to do with the war. Asia, the Middle East had nothing to do with the war. These countries got involved in the war because of their subservient relations or relationship with the West or the Western countries, European countries. But in terms of the possible origin of World War III, the possibility that World War III could start in Europe should be considered. We've been told we've been told many times. We've been told many times, okay, on social media, okay, whether by content creators making videos or scholars giving talk, that World War III will start, whether in the Middle East between Iran and Israel, or in Asia between China and Taiwan, or Asia again between China and India, or Asia again between North Korea and South Korea, or North Korea and Japan. But oftentimes we are not told that there could be a possibility of World War III starting because of European decision or decisions being made in the conceptual West. Such is the case for the Ukrainian war, the war in Ukraine, where when it began, and even till this point, countries in the global South, whether it's because of the positions of Ukraine and Russia in terms of global economics or global food production, or just trying to resolve a situation, we see the global South making move to try to end the war. Meanwhile, Western countries are not trying to end the war. They want it continued. They want the war continue, while at the same time telling us that if Vladimir Putin loses the war, he's going to go nuclear. And telling us at the same time that they want to defeat Russia. So you're telling me someone is going to kill all of us all if he's defeated, and at the same time you're telling me that you want to defeat him. There is some kind of like a bloodthirsty thing going on in the West, and even the content creators who creating videos talking about the possibility of a third war, a third world war. They are somewhat overzealous in their statements, in their prediction. And honestly, one thing that I've learned in the West, I have seen scholars, politicians, and others. They are saying bunch of nonsense. They are making prediction, it seems, and then hoping that what they predict happens, so that they can tell the rest of us, see, I told you so, I predict this and that. But from what I've learned, either what they are predicting is something that was destined to happen because it is just obvious, or they are basically just saying nonsense and then hoping it happen. So when it happens, then now they have credibility. And such is the case where we are being told that the world is going to go into chaos because of something that could happen in Asia, in the Middle East, in Africa, in South America, in the Caribbean, but not something that could happen in Europe, in the conceptual West. The conceptual West gave us two major wars: World War One, which used to be called the Great War, and World War Two. Now, citizens in the conceptual West are telling us of the possibility of uh, another war, a third world war. Yet, they are blaming the potential, the possible origin of the third world war on other people, while Western governments are making decisions that could lead to the third world war. It is just bad. It is interesting. But also, one thing that bugs me is the audacity that Westerners display of themselves in referring to the First World War as World War and the Second World War as World War Two and the potential or possible Third World War as World War Three. It, it's interesting because when we fight each other in Africa, it is basically African people just fighting themselves. They are destable. They can never get together. When people fight in Asia, it is Asians who are fighting themselves. In Latin America, in the Caribbean, when people go to war against one another, it is those people over there fighting themselves. But when Europeans fight and kill each other, it is world war. I think this is something that the rest of the world needs to basically point out to Europeans, basically call them out, okay, on this foolishness. Let the conceptual West know that, look, we are not going to play this game. Okay, it is your war, and to an extent, this is what is being pushed out there by the global South. When Russia invaded Ukraine, you had this push by Western countries to try to pull everybody into the war. India said, no, we don't want no part of this. Africa said, no, we don't want no part of this. Latin America said, no, we don't want no part of this. Basically, the countries that are playing the game with Russia, okay? The country that are dedicated to try to defeat Russia are the countries that basically, if you look at what's happening in terms of the global positioning system, and I'm not talking about GPS, I'm talking about the global geopolitical system, it is obvious that these countries were going to team up together against Russia or team up together to push a narrative, to drive a decision. So this is something that I do believe the rest of the world need to take note, and the rest of the world need to diplomatically manage. Whatever happened between Russia and the conceptual West, or whatever happened in the conceptual West, I think the rest of the world must not get involved physically, militarily. The rest of the world must get involved diplomatically. Try to solve these issues diplomatically. And if the West doesn't consider the perspective or the position of the rest of the world, that's fine. Move back, uh, uh, work on the non-alignment system, and manage the conflict. Let it stay in the West. It should not come out of the West. I think that's something that needs to be communicated. Recently, the French President Macron basically expressed the idea that French troop or NATO could be involved in Ukraine, directly into Ukraine. He probably is bluffing. But if he isn't bluffing, then once again we are seeing a possibility of a third world war happening because of a decision made by a European leader. But many of the videos and the comments that we are hearing on social media basically says that World War III is going to happen because of something that is happening in a black or brown country around the world. So I just want to put that there. I'm going to end here. Thank you very much for watching. And once again, peace.